Hey, Cookies here. We're going to be going over a viewer-submitted VOD today from the community Discord. This is a plus 13 Sanguine Depths as a Resto Shaman, and yeah, we're just going to play it from the start and just kind of go through it and see what there is to talk about. At first, you can just Flame Shock it. So like right here, once the tank hits it once or twice, you can just Flame Shock the Skirmisher. You don't have to put anything more into it, but then that completes two things. You're already doing damage, and you get Flame Shock on cooldown, so that by the time the actual pull begins and we get all this stuff pulled in, we already have another Flame Shock ready to throw out on, another potential mob in the pack. So that'll be one really important thing. And then as far as going into the pull, we throw down the Kyrian Totem early, which is good. And then as soon as we throw down this Kyrian Totem, this is where, again, having those Flame Shocks out is going to be huge, because it will allow us to proc the totem's damage portion by casting 3 damage spells, because we're going to have all these various, Lava Burst procs and stuff like that. If I rewind just a little bit again, one thing we can also see is you do end up Flame Shocking, but it's not that it's too late. Like right here, we get a Flame Shock on the Skirmisher. That's great. It's the highest health Skirmisher, so you correctly chose the proper target, because if you Flame Shocked one of these, it's not going to last nearly as long. But then what ends up happening is you get Flame Shock back off cooldown here in a second, and you just Flame Shock the same one, which technically is the correct choice still, but this is what I mean by, like, if you would have just Flame Shocked earlier in the pack, like right here, we put a Flame Shock out, and then it's off cooldown, we Flame Shock again, and then now it's coming off cooldown, again, as this is happening, and we can, like, you basically want the 2 Skirmishers and the Huntmaster, or the 3 Skirmishers, rather, all to have Flame Shock on them. I think typically you're looking to bounce your Flame Shock around, like, 3 targets, I would say, is pretty ideal. Just always having, like, 3 targets affected by Flame Shock. But that's just a small thing, because I don't actually know if, where is your Kyrian Totem? That's what I need to be able to see. Okay, it's right here, so I can see if it procced or not. So it looks like by the time you go into this next pull, let me make sure. So this is where we drop the Kyrian Totem. We're casting some healing spells, getting it to proc. And then it looks like by the time that we get it to... Yeah, okay. So by the time that we get it to proc the damage spells, everything is already dead, because we didn't have those Flame Shocks rolling ahead of time, or we weren't pressing them like right as the Kyrian Totem gets dropped. Sorry, Vesper Totem. I'll just start calling it that. Because the ideal thing that you see here is you drop this the Vesper Totem, and you should immediately be trying to think, okay, how can I cast 3 damage spells and 3 healing spells as fast as possible? So it's like, drop the Vesper Totem, Flame Shock something, Riptide somebody, Chain Lightning, Riptide somebody again, use a damage spell, heal again. So I always try to bounce back and forth. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be damage spell, healing spell, damage spell, healing spell, but that's what allows me to keep track of it really easily, because I don't have a weak core that like shows how many of each I have left. So trying to weave in both damage and healing spells so that you get that burst damage at the end while everything is still alive is really important. That's what's going to increase your overall damage a lot with Vesper Totem, is by getting those damage charges out as quickly as possible by casting a total of 6 spells, but 3 of them need to be healing and 3 of them need to be damage spells. All right, and then we go to the next pack here, and I'm just going to kind of keep repeating myself here, but it's to just get into the proper mindset for this, for the future, which is as soon as you go into this pull, again, you should already be like pre-targeting whatever has the most HP, which is going to be the Mist Dancer in this case. And right as the tank is going into this pull, if you already have the Mist Dancer targeted right now, so like if you target the Mist Dancer like right here as you're walking in, since you're not really doing anything else, you target the Mist Dancer, and then now you Flame Shock. You just get a free Flame Shock right before the pull starts, instead of doing other things like putting down Healing Rain or worrying about healing, because now you can start healing, but if you would have just had a Flame Shock down a little bit sooner, then it would have, it helps you initially start the pull with more damage instantly, because now you press Flame Shock on the Huntmaster, which is totally fine. It's a valid target. He has high HP, but it's not as good as the Mist Dancer, because the thing that Resto Shaman is especially good at in keys as a healer is priority damage, because you have Flame Shock and you have Lava Burst charges, and you have the Lava Surge ability that goes off while you have Flame Shock on things. So getting that, like, as many Lava Bursts into the high health target as possible. Like, for instance, here, you could have made a big difference, and this Mist Dancer could have been dead a lot sooner just from your damage alone. And then there you, like, Flame Shock it right as it's about to die. That would be a better Flame Shock used on the Brute. So every time you're going to press Flame Shock, I really want you to be trying to think about what is going to survive the longest when I press this Flame Shock. So, like, even right here, you press Flame Shock, the second Flame Shock, you press it on the Brute. But by this point, the Brute is already very low HP, and everybody's focusing this thing. Nobody's targeting the Gluttonous Tick, because that's just not what people are going to be doing. So this just gives you even more of a reason where right here, the Brute has less than half HP as the Tick, so you should just Flame Shock the Tick at this point. You should be Flame Shocking whatever has, like, I guess another way to put it is so that you don't have to worry about, like, mathing the different HPs of all the mobs, is just you should be trying to Flame Shock things that have like 50% or more HP remaining. If they don't have 50% more or more remaining HP, then you should generally think about Flame Shocking something else. If they're all lower than 50%, then yeah, you just Flame Shock whatever. But like right there, you only get like 1 tick of Flame Shock. That's useful. But you do have the right idea behind it, so don't, like, beat yourself up over it or anything like that. That's definitely not the point of this. But again, we go into this pull. Instead of pressing this initial healing rain, this healing rain is totally fine. You can press this healing rain as you go into this pull because it's giving you like a safety net and building into your Cloudburst and stuff when you drop it. But it's the same idea where, like, instead of casting that healing rain, you could just target one of the ticks right now as the tank is running in. Boom, he grips one. You Flame Shock it, and then now you drop Healing Rain, and nothing changed. You still got Healing Rain at the exact same moment in the key and in the pull, except you just were able to Flame Shock one of the mobs beforehand. And then you just have Flame Shock rolling this whole time, and then it's like, oh, I get a Lava Surge proc. I'll press Lava Burst because I feel like I have free time. And even then, you don't have to use the Lava Surge procs when you get them. That just comes with a level of comfort, but it's definitely getting into that mindset of pressing Flame Shock as your first ability in every single pull is going to really, really, really help. And then even here, as you're running up into this next pull, you don't have to worry about healing because you have the buff, so you just target the Brute, you Flame Shock it right now. And then you can worry about, okay, yeah, it's totally fine to drop a stun, we can drop a Healing Rain, we can do all these things, but having that initial Flame Shock down is going to be huge. And then even here, we drop the Kyrian totem again, but everything's starting to die by now. So by the time that we cast 3 damage spells, which is, I think, right around then is when you got it, when stuff started dying. It was like right there is when it procced. So that's still good. It still hit a lot of the mobs that were alive, but it could have been a lot sooner, if that makes sense. And that's the idea, is just Flame Shock is the first thing you should worry about when it comes to like trying to increase your damage in keys, is just try to be as efficient as you possibly can with Flame Shock. That is what's going to help the most out of anything, is just being really good about Flame Shock. Even here, as we start the boss, the first thing you should do, target the boss as the tank is running in. So like right here, you're healing people up. Now you target the boss, you Flame Shock, then you can go right back to healing everybody up, dropping Healing Rain, all this stuff. Nothing changes. You're just adding a Flame Shock into that initial, like, while you're just walking towards the boss right here, you're Flame Shocking. So it's just a free spell to press, basically. And especially on bosses, it's gonna pay off a lot as a Resto Shaman, because that's what's gonna make your damage on a boss like really, really significant. I will mention though, I really like the UI. Since I didn't really mention it at the start, I really like the UI changes that you made. The nameplates are nice. The like damage and self-healing that you added right here is really nice. It's not like in the way of your screen. It's in a nice area, so it actually looks visually appealing for anybody like looking at your screen, and also for yourself if you're like looking back at a video and stuff. or if you just want to see that information and you made it nice and small enough to where it's not like in the way, it's just passive information. And the target and player bar is a lot better. The cast bars are nice, the party frames are nice, the timers are in a good spot. All of that stuff is really, really good. So good job on that. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to rewind it just a tiny bit because this is tyrannical, so we're going to talk about the bosses quite a bit. Okay, so let's see here. It looks like we proc the first thing I will say is it looks like, do we go right in and drop a Cloudburst? Yeah, okay, so we drop a Cloudburst right at the start. Okay, now we have So when you have here, you should be focusing as much as you can into damage, just while you have the buff at least, because there's just no healing requirement whatsoever. And I would also... Ooh, did that orb just hit the boss? It did. That was really sad. One thing I definitely will mention is you have a very low cooldown defensive ability with Astral Shift. So you should definitely try to be pressing that. So like here at the start of the boss, you end up using SLT because you're kind of falling behind here because of, I guess it's just the general overall damage from like the relics hitting the group and the pull starting and you weren't all full HP and then like the charge happening. So it's totally fine to press SLT here. I think that's reasonable enough. The biggest thing though is like for this rush, you could have just used a defensive. It's still, like I said, it's still totally fine, but like your defensive on top of the SLT will really help. Also, whenever you use SLT as a Resto Shaman, if you have the Endurance Conduit, which you should, where Healing Surge is like 30 or X%, more efficient when you cast it on yourself, so it does more healing on yourself than anybody else. What you do with that conduit, how you really abuse it, is anytime you drop SLT, you should just be, like right here, you should just be spamming Healing Surge on yourself. And the reason for that is because it will heal you for more, and then the Spirit Link will split your HP to everybody else. So it's like the most healing value possible. Also, since it's Necrotic Week right now when I release this video, not in this video particularly, but like, the week of me talking about this video. For Necrotic, you can drop SLT on your tank when they have high Necrotic stacks, stand in it, heal yourself, and the Spirit Link will give them like the full value of the healing you're doing to yourself. So it's like, it's a way to negate Necrotic essentially and still heal the tank completely efficiently. So yeah, standing in SLT and then Healing Surge, like spamming Healing Surge on yourself is like the most efficient thing you can do for group healing for anybody inside the SLT. Obviously, sometimes people aren't going to be standing in it, like the Warlock isn't standing in it. But it's still just something to be mindful of because it's really, really useful for catching up and doing a lot of healing in a small amount of time. And another thing for bosses, just to get you in the mindset, I think this is going to be like the main topic of this video, is just getting you in the mindset of doing damage, is always keep Flame Shock active. You don't have to use Lava Surge charges, you don't have to press Lightning Bolt as a filler, you don't have to worry about all these other things, but whenever, like right here, whenever your Flame Shock is less than 5 seconds remaining on the duration, I want you to always, always, always be thinking about pressing it again when you can. So like right here, it's less than 5 seconds. I want you to try to fit a Flame Shock somewhere in here. You get knocked up in the air by Volcanic, Flame Shock's instant cast. You're walking back and you like aren't casting anything for a split second, or you just finish like this Healing Rain cast, boom, Healing Rain, Flame Shock, and then you continue on what you're doing, especially because everyone's full HP. So that was good right there. You press Flame Shock, but I think you could have even done it a little bit faster. So it's like Healing Rain, and then it looks like you cast a Riptide and then a Flame Shock, which is totally fine. But the idea remains the same. You really want to keep Flame Shock active as much as possible. The more you get better at realizing your uptime on Flame Shock, the better you're going to get at doing damage, because the first step is just Flame Shock. Like, do not worry about any other damage buttons you have until you're really good at keeping Flame Shock up on targets and using it efficiently. That's what's going to make the biggest difference out of any spells. So that's the first one to like have the most importance. And then your defensive is another thing where like we really want to be using that more often. Like we went this whole boss fight without using it, I'm pretty sure. So just pressing that whenever you think like, okay, so I think the best way to describe this is a lot of people like the reasoning I get from people when I ask them why they aren't using their defensives is typically like, well, I want to save it for, XYZ, or I don't know if I'm going to need it in, 30 seconds for something else, or I want to save it for if something bad happens or someone makes a mistake. And that's reasonable, but it's not what you want to be doing in keys. What you want to be doing in keys is just pressing your defensive and getting as many uses out of it as possible whenever you can. It's a damage reduction ability, not a life-saving ability, which is the whole point. Those imps looked absolutely hilarious. Holy moly. So what you should always be doing is anytime there is a pull where you can take unavoidable damage, press your defensive. So you're on the boss, he's doing a charge at you, he targets you specifically, press your defensive. You're on the boss and you didn't get targeted by a charge, press your defensive on the orbs when they spawn. Literally anything where you will get value from reducing damage taken that means you use your defensive correctly. And if you use your defensive and then 20 seconds later you die and you're like, man, I wish I had my defensive there, you learn something valuable so that next time you do the key, you know that you need your defensive for a specific spot. But you're never going to know that and learn those like switches of where you need your defensive and where you don't need it if you don't just press it and be willing to make mistakes. It's better to press it, 30 times throughout the dungeon than to press it, one correct time. It's better to press it like 20 incorrect times and 10 correct times than it is to press it 0 times throughout the whole dungeon and just be like, well, at least I saved it for when I needed it. So even here, like on this pull, when I'm doing this pull, I will literally go into it, I'll wait a little bit because the mobs don't really start doing damage for a little while, and I'll press my defensive at like the first thing that targets me. And if nothing targets me, I'll press my defensive for by the time that the Overseer does the dread bindings right here. Boom, defensive popped. Also, just looking at this poll as we went in, we'll just see how early we pressed a Flame Shock. So again, we should target something, Flame Shock it by now. I think you still are in the mindset of pressing Healing Rain as your first ability. So all I want you to do is, again, Healing Rain is totally fine. You don't have to like take it out of your rotation or anything. It's a totally okay spell to press in a lot of cases in M+. But I just want you to switch your focus to pressing Flame Shock and then pressing Healing Rain. So Flame Shock first, then Healing Rain instead of the other way around. And also on this pull, like for your totems and all the spells you're pressing, you don't need to run into melee. I notice you run into melee a lot when you're going into a pull and then you press Healing Rain like on top of yourself kind of. And I don't know if that's because you want to like make sure that you're also standing in Healing Rain, but honestly, a lot of the time you should stay out of melee because it's actually a very dangerous spot, especially for stuff like this where like you get dread bindings and now you're having to like run out, turn around, and then you run back like almost all the way into melee. I would just honestly avoid staying near melee, and I would just play from further away, and you can still just Healing Rain on top of the tank. You can Flame Shock from far away. You can use your Kyrian Totem from far away. Like there's no reason for you to be standing this close to mobs. So whatever is causing you to do that, then maybe try to identify that and make it to where you don't feel like you have to stand in melee. Because from my understanding, from what it looks like, is it's because of the Healing Rain on the ground is like you want to be standing in it. But honestly, that's not a very good benefit. This is a good SLT here. You're not afraid to press your defensives. That's good. Or your healing cooldowns. That's really good. The biggest thing here on these pulls with these oppressors is to be using your cleanse on cooldown. I don't know where it is on your bars, so it's difficult to tell. Oh, here it is. I found it. Right by Hex. Like here, we should be dispelling this immediately. It looks like you're silenced at the moment. Definitely be dispelling this right now, especially with all the bursting stacks. Like dispel is going to be a better friend than healing right now. And it looks like you still haven't pressed it because this guy has 2 stacks of the dispel debuff, which is really, really, really nasty in terms of how much damage it does. So I think that's what set you so far behind, is that person having that debuff and you not dispelling it. So anytime you're dealing with these oppressors, always try to be dispelling like on cooldown, pretty much. Just every time your dispel's up, you should be trying to use it on somebody who has debuff stacks, even if it's only 1 debuff stack. And then obviously you being in melee was a little bit rough, because another thing you can do to help yourself survive these pulls is by standing far away, and there is these, let me see if I can find it somewhere if I like rewind a little bit. Okay, yeah, so right here, on this little ledge right here, you can actually just like tuck yourself in right here and LOS. Like bolts, you can LOS the curses. If you see yourself get targeted by a curse, you can just LOS it on the pillar. The dread bindings you can LOS and they'll do 0 damage to you rather than it doing like a little bit of initial damage to you. So this little spot right here where this pillar is awesome. And also if the mobs are like up here, like if they're further up like this way, you can LOS also right here behind like this whole pillar right here. So yeah, utilizing LOS is really, really valuable, and multiple dungeons is not just this one, but this is one in particular that stands out. So yeah, see how he pulled the oppressor like all the way this way and the overseer this way? That what that means is now you could be standing like where I would be standing is like pretty much right here to where I'm in LOS to still hit all these mobs, to flame shock them, to do all that. And then when the overseer casts the dread bindings or the oppressors target me with something that I don't want to get hit with and we're not interrupting it and stuff, I would just LOS back here against the wall. So that is something useful. But the biggest takeaway, again, not to overload you with information, but the biggest thing is just utilizing dispelling as much as possible on these pulls with these oppressors. It's going to be the biggest difference maker. Just always dispelling on cooldown, especially during things like bursting week. So we go into the pull. The first thing, again, should be Flame Shock and then Healing Rain. But you do have a good like rotation of you go in and you have the same kind of like things that you do each time. You put down a Healing Rain, you throw a Riptide on somebody, and then you're usually pressing your Vesper Totem. Here again, dispelling would be really, really useful, like on yourself actually. There you go. It's a little bit late, but that's okay. And then here on this pull, you definitely want to be putting Flame Shock on the Custodian Javelin as much as possible, because again, he's going to be alive the longest out of all these mobs. So priority damage on Resto Shaman is what we're good at. So being able to help with that single target damage is going to be really, really useful. All right, and then whenever we pull these scribes in Sanguine Depths, we really want to be making sure that... So even here, like this is a good example. Okay, so if we were doing a little bit more damage just by keeping Flame Shock on Javelin from the very start, what we could have avoided was when we cleared all this stuff, the tank kind of got bored and was like, well, I don't want to just sit here and fight this guy alone, so I'm going to pull him out here. If we were just putting in Flame Shocks and maybe a few Lava Surge charges into the Javelin, into the mini-boss here, by the time he comes out here, he would already be dead. So we wouldn't have this happening where there's too much going on for this low of a key and the people in here. So like there's a tornado, there's people getting hit by throw research, there's a barbed shackles going out. It does get interrupted, but we have 3 scribes that are throwing research. So like people are just going to die. So like everybody gets hit by the tornado, Demon Hunter goes down, and now all of a sudden this pull is terrifying and not going well whatsoever. And then it looks like, okay, so the mage here, or that's a warlock, okay. So the warlock here has the curse debuff, so it is on you to dispel that. It is from the Remnant of Furies. They will cast, I believe it's called, oh, what is it called? We'll cast it here in a second. It is, where is it? Why am I not seeing it? Explosive Anger, that's what it is. So you can see it right there on the Remnant of Fury, and then he's going to cast it on the Warlock. You'll see the debuff on your frames. Right there, you want to dispel this immediately. You never want to let it sit on anyone. There is like a damage amp portion to it, but it's not worth it because of how much damage it does and how dangerous the ability is when it explodes. So this is something that you just want to be mindful of as a healer to instantly dispel whenever it goes off. So again, this is one of those things where utilizing our dispel like as much as possible and being ready to dispel and knowing what we're going to dispel is really, really important. Yeah, I would say this just gets a little bit out of control just because the head custodian isn't dead by the time that you guys start this poll, and it just is getting kind of all over the place. But it looks like you guys are going to recover. Demon Hunter comes back. Even here, it looks like you still haven't pressed the defensive this dungeon. As far as I know, I'm sure you may have pressed it like once or twice by now. But even like here just shows that you're not making yourself like aware of pressing your defensive, which is going to be a huge thing. So that's really the two things that I really want to emphasize this in this VOD specifically is pressing Flame Shock as much as possible and pressing it when we go into a pull when there's nothing else to do. That's the main thing, is when there's nothing to do, you should be trying to find ways to put Flame Shock on targets before there is something to do. And then also, when we're targeted by things, or when there's anytime there is unavoidable damage happening that we can reduce, we should be reducing it with the defensive, always. So like here, we get targeted by the Dread Binding that didn't get interrupted. We just press our defensive here, and it just builds that good habit of, oh, I got targeted by something, I'm pressing my defensive. And it's like building that habit is going to be absolutely huge. There's literally people in plus 24s and 25 keys that I do that still don't do that correctly. So don't beat yourself up over it. But if you can get good at doing that and pressing your defensive and really utilizing them, you are already so much better off than a lot of people who push keys and play this game and are trying to improve and stuff like that, because people just don't see the importance of defensives. But if you ask any of the best players in this game, they will always tell you that the people who are best at this game are the ones who are really, really aware of their damage intake and how, like, what's happening to their character, what things are targeting them, what damage they're taking, how much of it they're taking, all of that stuff. That is the most important thing. Playing the game itself, like just playing your class and knowing how to do your rotation and stuff, that's honestly the easier part. The hard part is understanding like the game outside of your character, and how that affects your character. So that is going to be the two biggest things. So even here, like as we go into this poll, what do? We target one of these. It doesn't really matter what. Ideally, we're targeting the thing with the most HP, but again, our main goal is just to start getting in the habit of doing it, and then we can worry about min-maxing, and then we Flame Shock as we go into a pull. And then we'd have Flame Shock up again by now. We pull that Sentinel, so we target the Sentinel and Flame Shock it. And it's just that idea of like repetition of just pressing Flame Shock as much as we can. We get rooted here, and there's a knockup. You definitely survive that with just your defensive. Like you would actually totally survive that there. Things are getting a little out of hand. See, even in stressful situations, like right here, you're finding ways to put Flame Shock on targets, which is really good. So now you just need to get good about putting Flame Shock on targets when there is no pressure happening, and like identifying those moments where nothing bad is happening. Okay, so there we press our defensive finally, but it's just right too late. Like, so you press your defensive because you see the craggy fracture on the ground, not because you have the chain on you. If you just press your defensive when you have this chain on you, then you definitely survive. Going into this next boss, the main things that we're going to be looking at is, again, keeping Flame Shock on the boss, and also ideally the adds when they spawn, and then how we're utilizing healing cooldowns or setting up for the small adds that spawn. Those are going to be the biggest like damage factors in this boss, is when the adds are spawned. We really need to be on top of our game for each ad spawn. Okay, so nothing too special right out the bat. We don't have Flame Shock on the boss. We don't have Flame Shock on the ads. Let me double check if we used it at the very start. I don't think we did. Let's see. So we go into the boss, no Flame Shock on the boss, so that's one thing we definitely want to be doing. And then as these ads spawn, these smaller ads, you definitely have room to just, right as it spawns, just Flame Shock it. Don't worry about anything else. Once you get more comfortable, then you can start throwing in Lava Surge procs into the ads to help kill it faster, because that will make quite a big difference as a Resto Shaman. But for now, the main thing is just applying Flame Shock to the boss, applying Flame Shock to the ads that spawn, and then just refreshing it on the boss each time that we need to. So that should just end up being every other, like you just rotate. So it's just Flame Shock on the boss, Flame Shock on the ad, Flame Shock on the boss, Flame Shock on the ad, just over and over and over like that. So here we have a Flame Shock on the boss. That's good. We're just not really being mindful of where the bad stuff is going, but that's all right. The ad spawns, ideally we Flame Shock it here. And then really all it comes down to is what we should be doing. So like there we pop Ascendance, but this is again one of those cases where this Ascendance should have been used as the ad spawn. So like right here we pop Ascendance because this ad is spawning. We should be planning our healing CDs as the ads are spawning, not after they spawn. So like here it's like, okay, there's going to be another ad coming up. I have Ascendance, I have SLT, I have my defensive. We still have a lot of mana. So what are we going to do when this ad spawns? And it's like, not until the ad is dead. That's the only time we press Ascendance. But now there's no actual healing to do. Like, this is the part where it's nice and calm. So now we're using this Ascendance during a not difficult portion of the fight. And in like a hierarchy, you would get punished for that very, very, very much. So this is where it should be like, okay, so we start the boss fight. What am I going to do for the first ad? Are we going to kill in time? Doesn't look like it. Do I need anything because we have Lust going? Probably not, because that first ad just melts. All right, so now we just need to be mindful of the Castigate that's going to happen. So we have a Castigate, it's targeting the Warlock. So what we should be doing is just riptiding whoever gets targeted by the Castigate, and then just spamming like 2 healing surges into them, and then they're good off the Castigate. That should be how we deal with every Castigate, is just riptide the person who's targeted, and then spam healing surge on them until the Castigate's done. So here we just spam healing surge on the Warlock. We don't end up doing it. We have so it's totally fine, but that's the idea with the future Castigates of what we should be doing. So now it's like, okay, the next ad is going to spawn next. So what are we going to do? Well, we should probably press one of our healing cooldowns, because we should go into this boss fight, especially on Tyrannical, just thinking the goal should be to just use every single healing CD by the time the boss is dead. So this ad that spawns, the second ad, we're going to pop Ascendance right as it spawns. So as soon as the ad spawns, you press Ascendance, and then it's like, okay, we have another Castigate. So what does that mean? Riptide the Warlock, spam healing surge into the Warlock. That's all we need to do. Everybody else will be totally fine because we have Ascendance rolling and we're using that healing cooldown for it. All we need to worry about is keeping the people with Castigate alive, and everybody else should by default be okay. Because they're not gonna be taking enough damage to die. The only people who are in danger of dying in this fight are typically the people who get targeted by Castigate, and especially the people who get targeted by Castigate during an ad being alive. The only time other people die who aren't targeted by Castigate are people who we didn't use healing cooldowns for when an ad was alive. So here we get another ad up. The boss is still a little bit healthy. So honestly, what I would do here is just drop an SLT. It's like, okay, this third ad that's going to spawn in the fight, I'm going to drop SLT. And especially in like a hierarchy and stuff, then you would obviously you're going to need to like heal through this ad anyways. So it's just every single ad that spawns in this boss fight, you're pretty much utilizing some kind of healing CD, except for the very first one. Not too much to talk about with the Frenzied Ghouls. The Scribes are pretty rough. Utilizing Dispel there during the bursting, that's really good. Again, here we should be utilizing Dispel as much as possible. It looks like there we Dispel right away on the tank when he gets the debuff, that's good. And we should keep doing that from here. So every time Dispel is up, we should be looking to Dispel somebody who has the Rack Soul debuffs. So there you do it again, you Dispel the tank, that's really, really good. Luckily, they're just all going on the tank, so that's just very lucky. And see, even here, like you utilize a bunch of healing spells into yourself as you're taking damage. But really here, you don't need to heal yourself. You just need to dispel yourself because you have 2 Rack Souls and 3 bursting stacks. So right as this silence ends, you start healing yourself. But instead, what you could be doing is just dispelling yourself. So like this healing rain, definitely don't need this. You can use this after. But just dispelling yourself first would be so much more beneficial. Because in like a higher key or fortified, you're definitely dead here. Like you definitely die to these stacks. So like even here, you're trying to spam heal yourself through these stacks when you could just dispel yourself, and it would get rid of the problem in, you know, a quarter of the amount of time that you took to heal yourself up instead. Okay, so this boss actually scales with fortified, so it's technically easier on tyrannical, but we will still talk about it. It's very similar to the second boss in that there is 2 main things that are happening. The first thing is that we need to be planning healing CDs for every time that the boss does the spawn the orbs around the room and do the big explosion AoE thing. I don't remember exactly what it's called right here, Rite of Supremacy. So our goal as a Resto Shaman should just be picking up 3 orbs and then typically sitting in Ghost Wolf form, because we get damage reduction if you have the talent. I can't see if you have the talent. But if you take the Ghost Wolf talent that reduces your damage taken up to 20%, you can just sit in Ghost Wolf, and then you get 60% damage reduction from 3 orbs, or you can take a 4th orb for 80%, and then you sit in Ghost Wolf for the other 20%, and that makes you immune to the damage, or take 80% reduced damage. So it's like Ghost Wolf is giving you an extra orb, essentially, is the best way to think about it, which allows your other teammates to get, you know, extra orbs in the process. So that should be the first thing that we do. And then right as we come out of that, so I think the best way to put it is the orbs spawn, we drop Cloudburst Totem, and then we go in Ghost Wolf, we pick up 3 to 4 orbs, then we stay in Ghost Wolf, the explosion happens, the detonation happens, and then we get out of Ghost Wolf and start focusing on healing, and then our Cloudburst will pop right at a good moment, like as all that damage is starting to happen. And then the other thing, so that's the first thing, is healing the whatever it was called, the Rite of Supremacy. So AoE healing the Rite of Supremacy, that's where we're going to be using healing CDs. That's where we're going to be using a lot of like our thought process. And then after the Rite of Supremacy is over, you have these iron spikes on the tank. So then your focus should switch from AoE healing into now keeping the tank alive and single target healing the tank, which is basically just pressing healing surge as much as possible on the tank during each, like as iron spikes is casting. Okay, so one thing that can help you here, the biggest thing is going to be not just running in a straight line, and instead what you should be doing is when you're dodging these, you should just be moving like just enough out of the way. So like here you step out, now you don't need to move anymore. You need to just stand still and plant your feet until another one spawns underneath you. Because here you keep running, so you end up unintentionally running into another swirl when you were already out of it, but you end up stepping into it. And then here you're still running, but one spawned here, so now you're stepping into the opposite end of it, and there's just no way you're gonna get to the other side when you could just stand still and plant right here and you're outside of it. You don't need to walk into it. So your idea should be move, get out of the way, stop moving when you're in the clear, and wait until one spawns under you again. Like, only dodge the ones that are spawning directly under you. You don't need to dodge, constantly or anything like that. Then here we have Rite of Supremacy happening again. So again, this is where we should be dropping Cloudburst. So it should be Cloudburst Totem, which it looks like we did. It looks like we dropped the Cloudburst a little bit earlier. So this is just an improvement on how to time your Cloudburst Totem better, because what's going to happen is this Cloudburst Totem is going to pop before the detonation even happens, so it's not going to be very useful. So this is why we drop Cloudburst right as the Rite of Supremacy is starting to cast. Then we run around, grab our orbs, stay in Ghost Wolf, and then we would stay in Ghost Wolf here. It doesn't look like you have the talent from what I can see. And then the explosion happens, this is good, and then we would jump out and start healing, and then our Cloud Burst would pop from like in 2 to 3 seconds from this point. So then we do a little bit of healing, and what we should be doing is prioritizing like casting healing spells, not instant cast, so you should save your Riptides essentially for when you're having to move around, because you're going to have to move a lot. So what you should do is right when you come out of this, it should be like pressing Healing Surge, things like Chain Heal, things like Healing Rain, anything like that that will be harder to press during all the swirls spawning and stuff like that. And then as we're forced to move, as this Endless Torment starts, this is where now, okay, it's like, I'm still casting, now a swirl just spawned under you, you move out of the way, and as you're moving, you press Riptide on somebody. You move out of the way, and then now you can plant again, you can stop moving, and then it's like you start channeling, you start casting another Healing Surge, and then another one spawns under you, so you move, cast Riptide, plant yourself, start spam casting, and then now Iron Spikes is happening, so it's focusing healing into the tank. And that's just a rinse and repeat of how you deal with that boss fight. Is focus AoE healing, and then switch to single target healing after the Endless Torment is over. Looks like we end up getting through this boss. I'm going to skip this pull because it's not too interesting. So we're going to go to... Oh, you guys end up doing this pull. This pull is very, very scary, but that's okay. You're quick to use Ascendance, so that's good. It looks like you end up dying here. Let's just see what happens. Okay, this is another one of those cases where you are finding yourself in melee, and that's what we want to avoid. So because you go into melee here, so like right here, you walk all the way into melee, then you press that healing ray, or you were about to press healing rain, there it is. So yeah, it's definitely a case of, I feel like you're trying to stand in healing rain. But you get all like cornered up here, and now you're behind the mob without, like, I guess you probably don't really realize it, so you have that sentinel behind you. So what's happening right now, like what's happening in my head right now when I'm in this position is the Dread Bindings is about to happen, and I'm going to be screwed because I cannot sit there and tank it, even on Tyrannical Key. So I need to get into a position where I can get away from the Dread Bindings. And where I am right now, you can definitely not get out of it, because now it's like, oh, Dread Bindings, gotta run. Oh, there's a Sentinel there. I can't run.
let's turn around and run this way. And then it's like, okay, well, now you've just sat in dread bindings for 4 seconds. So that's just one of those things where it's like, it's just being proactive is going to be really valuable over, you know. So the biggest proactive thing, like tip that I can give you is just you break the habit of going into melee, and then also just try to think about things a little bit ahead of time. Just think about like what the mobs are going to do, or what is gonna happen next. Always try to ask yourself that question kind of as the dungeon is happening. Just what is happening next? Just like right here, let's just take an example. We pull the Chamber Sentinel. What's going to happen next? What's the next thing that you need to be worried about? Because right now, you don't need to be worried about anything. You're healing, you're doing your thing. Okay, Severing Slice goes out, so I need to focus healing into the tank. And then as you say, I need to focus healing into the tank, and you start healing him, you need to be asking yourself, okay, well, what's next? The next thing is going to be the Craggy Fracture, the swirlies on the floor that we need to dodge. So we just need to be aware. Okay, I'm going to have to move in a second, so let's heal the tank. Oh, there we go. We need to move. Okay, what happens next? Because now we're in that position again where it's like, we're not in any danger. We know what we need to be doing. We need to be healing the tank. We dodged successfully. Now what's next? The next thing is going to be another cast of the Severing Slice on the tank. So we need to keep the tank nice and healthy. So here we keep the tank nice and healthy, and then it's like, okay, the mob's dead, we're all good, no Severing Slice, don't need to worry about it, but we were prepared for it, and that's what's important, is preparing for things. So this is where the gauntlet is going to come into play in this mindset exactly. So the first thing we need to ask ourselves as we go into this poll is, what is going to happen next? The first major thing is the tank is going to be taking a lot of damage. The first major thing that's going to happen is the boss is going to pick a random player and apply a bleed to them and everybody around them, and it's going to hurt a lot. So the main priority should be keeping the group topped up as much as possible. So Spirit Link is great for this. You can see that the Warlock has the bleed, so we should be focusing healing into the tank and the Warlock since they're the ones in danger. And then here again, it's like, okay, we cleared the bleed, the tank's healthy, he's able to manage himself now at this point in this poll. So what is happening next? The next thing, again, in the gauntlet is going to pretty much always just be the same thing. It's going to be the boss bleed. And the way that we prepare for the boss bleed that happens is just making sure that every single person in the group is topped up. So the way that we do that is we heal people, and then if, like, for instance, we're not full HP, let's say, for instance, like 4 people aren't full HP, and they're all in danger of dying, including ourselves. What do? Press defensive on yourself, press a health pot, do something that manages yourself by itself. Healthstone, all those kind of things could be valuable. And then you already checked yourself off that box, so you don't need to worry about yourself because you're being smart and proactive and pressing things like defensives and healthstones and health pots to avoid having to heal yourself. And then now you can put that attention into other people and get them topped up before this bleed happens. Here, everybody's topped up, so that's fine. Now you're dealing with these bursting stacks while the bleed is happening. This is another point where if you just press your defensive, it's so much less to worry about. Like here, you're dying just to bursting alone. And if you were just a little more proactive with like, okay, there's going to be a lot of bursting stacks here, or maybe you don't even know. Maybe it's just like, okay, whoops, tons of bursting stacks just happen or are happening. You just immediately should react and press your defensive, even if it's a little bit late, because it's going to help a lot. But where I would press my defensive, honestly, is as soon as this happened, right here, we're healing this tank. 3 people get hit by a bleed. You get hit by the bleed. If I get hit with the bleed, I immediately go defensive. Sometimes I press my defensive even before the bleed happens, just in case I get hit by the bleed. Like that's just how proactive we need to be with our defensives in order to make the best use out of them. Again, it's a super low cooldown defensive. It's not like something we have to really, really think about. Just pressing it, and if we get value out of it, that's great. If we don't get value out of it, that's okay. It's going to be back really shortly. So just by pressing our defensive alone here, it would reduce the stress so much in this situation, because now instead of healing 4 people here, we only need to worry about 3 because we already covered ourselves just by simply pressing one button. And it works the same way with health pots and healthstones. That's how I always utilize health pots and healthstones, is just like uh-oh, there's multiple people in danger. I'm going to not worry about myself and just press this one button, and now I can worry about everybody else. And then we go into the next poll. Oh, that's really unlucky with the Demon Hunter. This is where you guys are in a very tricky spot, but it's still just the gauntlet. All you should really be thinking about as a healer is just making sure that everybody's topped up for this bleed and then healing whoever gets the bleed. So like there, the Warlock gets it, and now the bleed's gone. So now you just need to be thinking to yourself, okay, the bleed's gonna happen again soon. So I need to keep everybody nice and topped up. So the goal should just be keeping everybody healthy. And there, the bleed goes out again. It's on the Warlock and the Priest. So now we just heal the Warlock and the Priest and don't worry too much about anybody else. Here again, we don't have to worry about ourselves if we just press our defensive. Even if we get hit there, that's totally okay. Just a little bit of awkward positioning on the barrier. And then we continue, and it's just the same thing repeats itself over and over. Keep the group nice and healthy. Heal the player who gets hit by the bleed or the players, and then keep everybody topped up again. All right, so now we're going to talk about this boss. So the first thing is, again, it's going to kind of be similar in a way to all the other bosses, where we're thinking about two main things. The first thing is, who is the bleed targeting? And we need to pick them up as full HP as possible before the bleed hits them, and then we just need to keep them alive as they have the bleed on them. And whenever we have the bleed, we should be trying to utilize things like Health Pot, Healthstone, and Defenses, so that we don't have to worry about ourselves nearly as much. And then the time to use healing cooldowns in this fight is really any time. Oh my gosh, that Demon Hunter just fell off the edge. The best time to use healing cooldowns is either during these barriers right here where the boss does AoE damage if we're not in a healthy state. So if we go into those barriers like not full HP. And then the other time that we can use healing cooldowns is if additional people get hit by the bleed that shouldn't have got hit. So like even right there, for instance, we end up standing kind of close to a little too close to the boss. So we cleave somebody with our bleed. So like right here, we have 3 bleeds out. This is where I'd probably just press Ascendance just to keep topped up, because this next set of bleeds could be potentially really dangerous, since anytime someone is going to get 2 stacks of the bleed, so like right there we got 2 stacks, that is when it becomes significantly more dangerous. So here again is where like defensive would be huge, something like Spirit Link would be huge as we step in here. But we do manage, but this is where I would definitely have already pressed a healing cooldown or 2 by now. It's just like, I would really think about it just when additional people get bleed. So like there, 4 people just got hit by the bleed. 100% I would be pressing SLT or Ascendance right now just to top everybody off again. So don't hesitate with that kind of stuff. That is a little rough. So here, the main thing is it seems like you just end up kind of panicking a bit because there's a lot going on. There's people with a lot of bleeds. There's people dying. The tank isn't even healthy. And you have all these piercing blurs going out and more dashes happening. So what needs to happen here is it's just a simple matter of priority, and also, again, utilizing healing cooldowns ahead of time and being proactive. So as soon as we get into a tricky situation, right here, when 4 people get hit by a single, or 3 people get hit by a single bleed, and now we have a total of 4 of them in the party, this is where it's like, okay, I need to catch up. I need to, get in a more stable spot. So I'm going to press a healing cooldown here. And then as we go here, the priority should just shift, because now we've pressed our healing cooldown. So we've dealt with the initial problem, which is keeping the group alive. And now we have the, like the stability essentially to go into here and just think about the piercing blurs. But what's happening is you have to think about healing the group and keeping everyone alive. So you can't also focus on dodging the piercing blurs. It's just not going to happen. So next time we just need to be a little more proactive with using our cooldowns. And then as we go into this, it's like, okay, I've used my healing cooldowns. Now we're dealing with the piercing blurs. I can kind of look away from healing for a second to focus on dodging the piercing blurs, because that's where your focus should shift. It's like, okay, piercing blur is happening. I've done enough prep work leading into this so that now I can focus my attention towards the piercing blurs and dodging them and not getting hit. And the people in the party won't die because I'm looking away from them for 2 seconds. If they do die from you looking away from them for 2 seconds, then that again is probably the fault of not pressing a healing cooldown. Like here, the priest dies because he had 2 stacks and he was already like half HP. If we just used a healing cooldown sooner, we would have been totally fine. Warlock probably dying here. Oh man, are they gonna live? Do you guys end up killing this, or do you guys have to? You guys actually end up killing this, don't you? I can't tell how much HP the boss actually has left. 51. Oh yeah, you guys are gonna kill it. That's awesome. Warlock DHOP. There you go. You end up getting it. But in a hierarchy where that wouldn't have worked, that is what you just need to be thinking about doing, because now you're dead the whole fight and you didn't even get to use any of your healing CDs, and that feels super bad. So don't be afraid to press them, especially in boss fights. In boss fights on tyrannical weeks especially, but even on fortified weeks. On boss fights, you should almost be thinking of just like using every healing CD you have, because once you get into like hierarchies, it's going to get to the point to where like most boss fights are like 2 to 3 minutes, which means if you press your healing cooldowns, like all your healing cooldowns at the, in the middle to the end of the boss fight, they're going to come back up by the time you're in the next pull, or at worst the pull after that. So it's like you're not even missing out on cooldowns or doing anything like that. You're just using them and then getting them back by the time the boss fight is over anyways. So I know that was a pretty long video. I'll try to keep the reviews a bit shorter in the future, but we're just kind of trying something out. Let me know what you think. And yeah, thank you, Bear Muffin, for the submission, and thank you guys for watching. I'm glad to be back. I've been sick for a really long time. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys later.